find an equivalent English word, and they do that throughout the whole text. So if they take the book of Romans, they will find, for every Greek word, they will find the equivalent English word. And so what we do is we come away and we have a kind of a choppy, stilted, formal translation. And they will go in and they will smooth the edges out and put in thes and ats and so's and that kind of thing. In the end, though, you have it. It's much the translation that you end up with is much closer to the original. So the next type of modern Bible is a thought for thought translation, or what's called dynamic equivalence. And what this really means is, an example of this is like the NIV, where the translator will read a sentence or a phrase, and they'll read that in the original language, like the Greek or the Hebrew, and then they will say, okay, well, I understand what that means in Greek. Now let me phrase it how it would mean in English, or whatever language I'm translating it to. So then it becomes a thought for thought translation. So it makes it a smoother read. It makes it easier oftentimes to understand. But the difficulty that you have there is that interpreter is standing between you and the original language. Does that make sense? Where his personal interpretations can get in the way. So third type of translation, and it's really not a translation, but you can categorize it as is a what I call a personal opinion translation. Okay, and that's really just to say a paraphrase. Some good examples of a paraphrase is the Message Bible, and that's a paraphrase, and I believe that the whole message is out now, it's all 66 books. And another paraphrase is the Living Bible, which has been out for years and years. That was my first Bible that I got when I was, my mother gave me that Bible when I was in junior high. So really, all Bibles, all modern Bibles, can fit into these three categories: formal, dynamic, or paraphrase. So if we're armed with this, it makes it much easier for you and me to be able to decipher, to be able to distinguish between these. But still, now there does seem to still be an endless number of translations out there available. And at first look, it seems like they all claim to be the best. They all claim to be the closest to the originals, or they all claim to be updated and improved, and they are the one you need. And of course, there's a key here, but let's first look at the different kinds. Let's go through a short list of the different kinds of translations that are popular today. First, and foremost, of course, is the King James Bible, or the King James Version. And that's been around for many, many years. Then there's the New King James Version, which is an updated or a modernized version of the King James. It takes out the archaic language, is what it does. Then there's the literal version, and that's put out by J.P. Green, who just passed away here not too long ago. It's a very literal translation, so it's very word for word. The RSV, the New Revised Standard Version. Then there's the NIV, very popular Bible. When I was in Europe and I was a new believer, I had a missionary tell me, because I went to him and I was explaining to him that I did not understand the King James at all. It wasn't making any sense to me. And he said, well, go down and get an NIV. And so that was the first Bible that I had actually read all the way through. And of course, there's the Modern King James, which is also put out by J.P. Green. The Message we've talked about, the Living Bible we've talked about. Then there's Darby's translation. There's the King James 2000, there's the Net Bible, and the list goes on and on. I mean, there's all kinds of different Bible translations out there. Some more popular than others, and that's just, and there's a reason behind it, why there's so many different translations. So, and that may be a question that you're asking, why are there so many different translations? Isn't it all the same Bible? I mean, there's only so many different ways that you can restate the obvious, isn't there? Well, unfortunately, the answer to that question has very little to do with the actual Bible itself, and has more to do with a thing called capitalism. The reality is that Christianity today runs more on capitalism and the idea of progressivism than it does on trusting in the Lord. Look at the glaring similarities between secular music and the secular publishing industries and their contemporary Christian counterparts. You'll see that most of what is passed off today as being Christian is merely just a repackaging of the secular world. So we have to realize that modern Bible translations is actually a business. It's predominantly driven by free enterprise, and that can be translated as, unfortunately, greed. So Many of the phrases, many of the changes that are made to modern translations from one translation to another, a lot of those changes really don't have to do with the accuracy or inaccuracies of the texts that they use underlining them. It actually has to do with the fact that the wording has to be changed enough so that the publisher and editors and the people involved with the work can get the copyright on it, so then they could start charging money for it and keep others from doing the same. So unfortunately, that's the reality of the world. Now, other Bibles, such as like the literal translation, the modern King James, these were all developed as a reaction by certain individuals to the carnal activities that are going on in the Christian community today. It doesn't really matter how you shake it. We need to be aware that there is an entire industry within the church today, within Christianity, that could really care less about saving your soul as long as they can relieve you of your hard-earned money. So you really got to be careful of that and realize and just keep in mind what Paul said: "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." But I don't want to put the blame all on this free enterprise system within Christianity. There are some significant differences between the different manuscripts or the different copies of the originals. We've talked about how that could be as errors seep in, but there's also some specific doctrinal issues at work in these versions as well. There are groups and people who desire to destabilize the authority of the Bible itself. Others have kind of a cultish interpretation of what the Bible says, or slant or skew the text to make it fit what they believe or what they want to believe. So, and that's when we get into each denomination, pumping out its own version. So in the end, there's really only one solution that I've found where we can actually receive the whole counsel of God, and that's really to use all the Bibles to compare and use them against themselves, really. So let's see how we can do that. It's actually really easy. The first thing we need to do is we need to cultivate a desire to read the Bible. And what I mean by that is that if you're not drawn to read the Bible, you're going to have a problem getting into it. But there's a solution to that, and that is if you don't have a desire to read the Bible or study the Bible, then you can go to God and you can ask God for the desire. And believe me, He will give it to you if you ask. So it's important that we need to recognize that there is value in reading the Bible. It's not a popular concept today. In fact, less than 10% of professing Christians today actually have read the Bible completely through. So there's a tremendous shift that has occurred in recent history, especially in America. Christians of antiquity, Christians, centuries before, as Jews as well, were known as people of the book. So what happened? Well, now today, Christians are not known as people of the book, but what are we known for most today? What word summarizes Christian?